Powell plays a game like he's an academician from above. That I'm going to do half, I'm going to do a quarter, like he's, God of the money markets. There's a point at which he's out of control. The markets are out of control, his control. And the size of the error that's been committed over the last 15 years is so huge, they can't even stop it. They can produce liquidity, they can try to buy things, support their own debt market, but there's a crisis coming, and it's not going to be resolved quickly. I mean, you've got multi-decade crisis built in the debt market.
Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. I'm conducting this interview with Michael Oliver on the 21st of December. So
Mhm.
just after a pretty eventful week, I would say, for the stock market. Michael, it's really nice to have you back. We haven't talked for a while. How are you?
Thank you, Mario. Good to be back.
Great. So let's start with the stock market because you talked about a level that you wanted to see on the S&P. I think is 5750. I know we're pretty far away from there now, but back on Wednesday I saw that the low was 5796, I think. So maybe we can start with that. And for those of you who don't know, Michael is a technical analyst, but he's kind of developed a niche way of looking at technical analysis through momentum. And I
Mhm.
think, in my opinion, what that does, that gives you like an edge over the common technical analysts, which I would put myself under that uh, nomenclature. But anyway, Michael, what do you think is going on with the stock market?
Well, we have our assessment. You don't even need to look at the technicals to realize this, but it's 15 years of upside. Nasdaq's gone up 18-fold. S&P's gone up eightfold. You go back and look at the so-called uh, blow-off peaks and collapses that followed 29, for example, or look at mid to 1970s, or look at 2000.com top, or look at the 2007 peak before the real estate collapse. Okay, you look at all these and people look back and say, oh, it was a huge bear market. Well, the bull markets that preceded those collapses were like a third or a quarter of the dimensions of ours. Now, in the US, I'm talking in terms of duration and in terms of dimension. Okay. Now, you can say, well, have a great, strong economy. Okay. Well, fine. Yeah. Okay. Uh, we have the Fed has printed money like crazy. In fact, if you look at any 10 or 15-year period, look at M2 growth, the last 15 years have been greater than any 15-year period in the past. Okay, so the money flow has continued. The degradation of your measurement stick. You measure the S&P, the Dow by points that are measured by the dollar. Okay, if the dollar's degrading in real value and they're going up, you're really not going up unless you're beating the heck out of that rate of. Okay, you get the point. Then you look at another chart, the Fed funds rate chart. You go to the St. Louis Fed site, you can see it. Go back 50 years and look where rates have been for the last 15 years. About 10 of those years, zero. Okay, free money. Okay, super. Yeah, that's free market pricing of money, right? No, it's artificially from above. They took money to zero effectively. And yeah, it popped back up, like to five, well, lately to about, yeah, look at going back to the 1950s. But if you go back 50 years to, let's say, 1975, you'll see that the 5% level in 1975 was a pretty low level. And now you got down, to a percent or two, and then you got down to zero, and then you pop back up. And in 2020, they took it back to zero. And even now, with the recent rate rise, and now it's, of course, turning down, uh, that's not a high level. It's still cheap money. Okay. Well, when you make a decision to, let's say, build a family home and buy some new acreage and build your home, one of the major factors is the cost of money. If you're building a factory, you're going to add new employees and so forth. Cost of money is a factor. If you're a state government going to build new highways, cost of money is a factor. So a lot of decisions, not just stock market, are based on false assumptions. Namely, the cost of money has been distorted for the last decade and a half. So that creates error. And that's what's embedded in this stock market bubble. It's not merely a stock market bubble. There's a lot of other economic, real world consequences waiting to be ripped open there. And just like in 2007 when the market dropped, I mean, all of a sudden you get in the late 2008 and 9, people started hurting, even if you weren't involved in the mortgage markets or you weren't even involved in the stock market. You got laid off. It was a disastrous economy. This time it's a far bigger bubble than ever. Okay, now, once it breaks, the history of market tops in the US after these enormous bull moves, ours, which is 3 or 4 times bigger. Okay. The Fed enters, they start cutting rates. In fact, they sometimes enter very early. For example, in 2007, 1 month before the top tick in October 2007, the Fed cut rates by half a basis point, and they kept cutting for a couple of years and got it down to zero ultimately. Did that stop the bear market? Nope. 2000 dot-com top. Okay, NASDAQ 100 was the leader then, just like it is now. You made your high in 2000. We put out a sell signal in January based on annual momentum, and it fiddled around for the rest of the year, mostly going sideways in the S&P and the NASDAQ, a little bit of decline. And in fact, it made some new highs in the summer in the S&P, summer of 2000. In January 2001, early in the month and also late in the month, Fed cut rates. Weren't very far off the high. There was no overt bear market at that point. They started cutting and they cut all the way down. Did that stop the market? No. NASDAQ 100 dropped 82%. And not only that, it took it 16 years to get back to that price level again in the year 2016. So it was devastating for an investor. So here's what we face. We can see technically that this is an excessive bull market. Our momentum metrics, and we don't use normal type, things on your screen like MACD and RSI, the free stuff. We look at structure, and we often will, most of the time, we'll plot a price chart, like a monthly bars, weekly bars, and so on. But then we'll oscillate those bars in relationship to given moving averages. But right now, our focus is on long-term momentum. Because usually when you break long-term momentum, the trend lasts a while. It's not something that lasts for 2 months and it's over. So we're looking at a quarterly momentum, for example, and that's when we measure the monthly bar chart action of the S&P or the NASDAQ 100 and plot it in its relationship to the 3/4 moving average. Now here you get a chart that's a little more intermediate. This is from a week ago, before last week's break. This is what the S&P 500 looked like on a weekly bar chart. Lovely chart. 2022 highs, 21 highs, all the way up here to the current action. Then we were in the well above 6,000. Now you see the price chart, and if you draw a trend line from that 2022 price low way down there at 3,500, you can't find a multi-point. You can draw a 2-pointer, but then the rest of the lows don't connect to it. But when you plot the momentum chart here, what we're using is a 40-week moving average. That's equivalent to about a 3/4 moving average. So it's a long-term metric. But look at the number of lows that align on that structure. Not 1 or 2, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lows define that structure. You can't find the 5-point trend line on the price chart, but on momentum you can. Now notice another thing. As price advanced from the 2022 low, you'd have humps up, pull back, new high, pull back. Momentum was agreeing with that. It's making higher highs along the way as it zigzagged until the last surge. The last several months of new price highs did not produce new highs in momentum, lower highs. Now that's a tap on the shoulder. It's not actionable. It's just kind of saying, hey, I'm getting anemic here. Price may look good, but I'm not as strong as I look. And then they hugged that structure for 3 hits in a row over a several month period, which indicates anemia also, when you keep coming back to support and having to rely upon it. Unlike the prior lows that occurred in the past couple of years, when you hit that line, you exploded. This time you didn't. You groped, which indicated weakness. Well, last week blew the structure totally off the page. You're way down below there. You're down below the zero line. Okay. So anyway, momentum did break. Now, when we go out and look at the NASDAQ 100, for example, and it's This is NASDAQ 100. That's monthly. Roll another page there. I think you find another chart there. Okay, here's what we're looking at. This is no, that's 3 week. I'm sorry. There's a quarterly momentum of NASDAQ. Well, here, yeah, there's an interesting chart there. Roll to the XLF. We also look at sectors, not just the indices. This is the financial sector. Now, it's taken out 5, 6 months ago, finally took out its high that occurred in 2022. The S&P did it before that, but the financials finally joined in. The financial ETF includes banks, asset management companies, insurance companies, a wide swath of financial related companies. So it's broad, but it's key. Now, look at the momentum chart. You can go back to the 2022 low, and you've got 1, 2, 3, almost 4 points along that line where you've been groping that line. Now, since that chart, which is December 1st, this has dropped back down. Not below the line yet, but when you open next quarter and we adjust the 3/4 moving average up, the long-term mean follows up underneath the market. The structural point of breakage starting in what, 6, 7 trading days is going to be right around the price level you're trading right now, which is like 48 area. See, we dropped 3 points since that 51.34 price since then. So you'll be opening below this line when you roll into next quarter if you're hanging around where you are right now. Now, price won't be breaking anything. They'll look, just a dip, it's a buying opportunity. But momentum says, no, you broke it. So, and this is representative of the broad market, broad indices, and a lot of other sectors, including like healthcare sector, industrial sector, and so forth. So it's not merely an index here or there. It's the entire market is showing this structural vulnerability. It's not only reflected in the US, but it's also reflected in 2 other major markets around the world. Not so much in Europe. Europe doesn't have the kind of bubble that we had, measured from the 2009 low to the present. They haven't done what we've done. And look at China. China hasn't done what we've done. They're less than double the price where they were in 2009, whereas we're 8, 9-fold or 18-fold above that price. They will probably go down with us when we turn down. The global economy will. But those indices aren't as vulnerable as ours, but there are 2 that are in what I call pre-crash mode. Sensex in India and the Nikkei 225 in Japan. They both have extreme bubble dimensions in terms of duration, percentage gain, and their momentum trend structures smack you in the face when you see them. Price chart looks joyous. Momentum says, you're going to open at death's door when you open next quarter because the numbers will change. So what we see at MSA is the highly likely potential that we're at the top. And it won't take but sneezing from here and you'll blow structure that will then precipitate a price drop. Momentum almost always leads price in trend changes. So people looking at price charts and trying to define where does it look bad, it's a lot lower than where you are now, but momentum says, no, you're basically there. All you got to do is be here next quarter. Now that has major impact on other markets, as we know.
Yeah, so the momentum for the people who are first watching this, if it goes below zero into negative, that's when
Or the structure might not be at zero. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. It
breaks
depends
the trend line.
where the structure intersects.
Yeah.
So it's not always, for example, at the 3/4 moving average,
Yeah.
which is somewhat similar to a 200-day average. It's not always there where the structure is.
Yeah.
So a lot of moving average type folks, technicians who look at the 200-day or the 50-day and think that's God, you can weave those numbers quite often and it won't mean anything.
Yeah.
The issue is where is the momentum structure? And it
And
could be above or below that level. Yeah.
you spoke about the Nikkei, and it's ironic because back in '89 and in the late '80s, Japan, and I remember I started in the financial sector in the late '80s, and Japan was it was like the
Oh,
US now.
right.
Everyone was talking about Japanese management practices, the Nikkei while Nikkei went up to almost 40,000 back then. And then 2, 3 years later, it was a basket case. Do you see the same? I'm not saying the US is going to become a basket case, but do you think the euphoria about the US is a little reminiscent of that?
Yeah, I think it's yeah, back then also, I think it was Nippon Telephone and Telegraph stock, one stock was worth the entire New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah.
Anyway, uh,
Nvidia market cap is bigger than the GDP of Germany.
yeah, 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 similar. Yeah, and by the way, Nvidia is starting to break already. Now, a lot of people are saying, "Well, we'll find something else." Well, you can't ignore the leaders, okay?
Yeah.
Because when the leaders break, yes, it's true. Some other sectors will follow, but not be as weak, but they'll follow.
Yeah.
And when NASDAQ topped in 2000, the rest of the world went with it ultimately, okay? Even though it was, quote, the internet sector at the time. Um, but yeah, I think we're in a very bad position because this time the bubble by any dimension is far bigger than any other. The technical dynamics that we see on long-term momentum suggest that when you start down, and you don't have to crash. A lot of people, oh, well, you break this, you're going to. When we break these structures next quarter, assuming we break our specified trigger numbers, which are in our reports, and we're looking at NASDAQ 100 primarily, S&P 500, and a lot of the sectors as well for coincident signals. You don't have to crash. In 87, we had very, very similar quarterly momentum structures as we have right now. Whereas if you looked at the quarterly oscillators, then you'd say, oh, it looks like today. Okay. And when you broke them, boom, 2 weeks later, you had a crash, 35%. Boom. Okay. Now, I happened to catch that crash. I was a futures broker then. I started MSA 5 years later in 1992. I didn't catch it in a big way. I had, a handful of puts on, and I put my customers in it. And we caught it. So it was fun. But it taught me a lesson that quarterly momentum structures or long-term momentum structures are to be paid attention to because they'll have clarity that price won't. And when they break, pay attention. And we're facing the same situation now. Question is, once you break these numbers that we specify, do you have to crash? No. Most bear markets in the US don't commence with crashes. 29 did, and then had a 50% rally, and then went to hell for 2 more years, off the page. 2000.com top, it never really crashed, meaning, 30% in a couple of weeks. It was a layered bloodbath. And in the 2008 bear market, it wasn't until a year after the high, October 2007, October 2008, you finally had a month that dropped like 30%. But it was already a year off its high. And that wasn't the bottom either. You went lower into March of 2009. So you don't always have to crash when you break structures. But it's likely you'll go down in very sharp layers. In other words, you're not going to go down 2-3% rally, 2-3% rally. You're likely to have more like a 20% drop and a 5% rally, that type of thing. And we hold open the possibility there could be a crash, but I'm more inclined to think this is going to be a layered disaster. And you know what the technicians say, 20% is a correction, quote unquote. And so if you take the 20% off the market now, they're going to be talking about, hey, it's a buying opportunity. Well, at that point, you'll have destroyed long-term momentum so badly, it isn't a buying opportunity. Okay. But so that's what I think we face. And the problem is it's going to have real world wave effects, just like it did at the other tops. And we just put out a report a week ago. We went back 100 years. And we looked at all those major tops that everybody knows about, 29, mid-70s, .com, 2007, et cetera. And looked what happened from an investor's point of view. Meaning somebody who, like buys and holds, wants to hold stocks for the next decade. Okay. The problem was that, yes, the bear market low may have occurred a couple years later. In most cases, it was about 2 years. 2007 to 2009, 2000 to 2002, for example. So most of your devastation in price was over in a couple of years. But the problem was, if you didn't get out at the appropriate point to avoid that, it took a decade or more to get price nominally back up to where it had been prior to the break. So it was a total, not just 2 years of disaster, but a decade or more of hoping to get back break even. And it really wasn't break even because, in a 10 or 15-year period, the degradation of money is tremendous. The buying power of the dollar drops 50% every decade, basically, in terms of real buying power. So, even getting back to nominal high again 15 years later, it's not a success from an investor's point of view. And this time it should be quite devastating in terms of dimension, not necessarily duration of that major decline, but the getting back to normal. Because if that many errors have been committed in the bubble process, not just market buying errors, but economic errors, the healing process is not quick. And that will affect other markets. And we have our eyes particularly on the monetary metals because we know what central banks do when their stock markets break. They go berserk. And all the data points that we like to talk about that are, well, look okay, and so forth and so on, they always break sharply after the stock market turns, not before. So all the data points people think are leadership numbers, they're not. They're laggard numbers. And the Fed will panic when they start to see the highly negative numbers that follow the stock market top. Meaning monetary expansion, money cheaper than it should be, et cetera, et cetera. What's the beneficiary? Gold and monetary metals.
Yeah, and we've seen recently, of course, a correction in gold and silver after the election result. So maybe you could, I've got here a report from December 1st. You covered the gold and silver. Should we look at that?
Yeah,
And
sure. Go ahead, pop it
tell
up.
the
See what we got
viewers
here.
as well that Michael is not always bullish gold because I think you called the top in 2011, didn't you?
We were bearish from late 2011, early 2012, especially through February 2016.
Yeah.
And that was 2 months, actually 6 weeks off the bear low in December of 2015.
Yeah.
And we've stayed long-term bullish on gold since then. Now, gold then was 1,050. We got bullish at $1,140 in February 2016 and have remained bullish based on annual momentum. It has not broken. Lesser time factors have had downtrends. Have an intermediate downtrend last 3 to 6 months or something, and you go back up. But the long-term annual trend from an investor's point of view has remained positive. And we've been arguing, well, for example, we went into a trading range in gold for 3 years. After the 2020 surge, they got it up to 2,070. You went sideways in gold monthly price. I don't think you've got the chart there, but maybe later in that report you do. But anyway, after that 3-year sideways boring range in gold and a downside range in silver and the gold miners during that 3-year period, in March of this year, yeah, there you go. That's the price action there. In March of this year, as we came back up over 2,000 again, which we'd been up there 3 times before, 2,050, 2,070, 2,050. We got up there again, and in March we said, this is different this time. This time you're going to take off and begin a more accelerated phase in the gold market. And it did, but it didn't mean you're not going to have corrections. You can see. Now, most people don't look at these kind of charts. They look at daily or hourly and they panic every time there's a sell-off, like that's the end, it's all over, it's all over. What will cause gold to go into a very accelerated phase? That's a log scale chart. No, that's point scale. Okay. What's going to cause it to go berserk is when the central banks again put the pedal to the floor. And we know what does that historically and always, and that is when you break the stock market and cause the economic metrics to turn south in a decisive way. They print, they cut rates, they buy ETFs, the whole deal. And that creates liquidity flow. The problem is historically it never saves the broken bubble of the stock market. It goes elsewhere. And we went back 100 years and we showed that from 1929 to 32 bear market, for example, in the stock market, gold wasn't trading then. It was illegal. Home stake mining went up 1,000%. So if you're a long-term investor and you wanted to be long something in that period, gold miner. Then when you look at all the other bear markets, mid 70s to like 75 Stock market was under pressure, especially till late 74. What was gold doing? Straight up. Gold went from the mid 30s up to 200. Okay. Then stock market went into what was called stagflation, and it went sideways. A waste of time for an investor from the mid to late 70s through 1982. It was like this, up, down, but went nowhere. Gold exploded to $850 an ounce by 1980. Okay, massive eightfold move. And then in 2007 through 2009, in fact, even further than that, gold went up while the stock market went down. There was one exceptional month that was in October 2008 where gold joined stock market for 1 month. But basically, that was a correction within the uptrend. But as an asset category from an investment perspective, if you were long gold or T-bonds back then as well, you did well during those years while the stock market hurt you badly and then didn't recover until like 2013 in the S&P, make a new high again. Gold has always done well during those times, primarily because gold is a reflection of the degradation of the money unit. And that is a factor that is an element that's caused by the central banks panicking. And you can bet this time they're going to panic big time because the bubble breaking is huge. Gold will be the beneficiary. It already is. In fact, most people don't even know this, but if you go back to January or the close of last year, so we're almost 1 full year, gold's up slightly more than the S&P. Tell people that and wouldn't believe it. Okay. It's up more than the NASDAQ. What? Okay. Silver's been up more than both. I think it may be about par with the S&P or slightly below, but basically the monetary metals, without being in blow-off mode, in a ratcheting manner, the arm wrestling that you showed on that chart, they're still up as much as the stock market. So, if you're an asset manager, run a big portfolio, and you're not even a gold bug, but you start to get nervous about the stock market. Like Berkshire Hathaway's gotten nervous recently, okay? Okay. A lot of asset managers who've been around like you and I have know that something's not right here. Now, you have to be long because you lose your client base. But once you have enough evidence that, it really is starting to break, you want to move to a safer place. And right now, what is the safer place? You don't even have to be a technician. Just do year-to-date chart. Gold's been as good as, hey, it's working. How come? Okay. And when you break that stock market, we argue that's when the asset class flow will commence out of that broken category into very few other alternatives. Primary one being the monetary metals.
Yeah, and I've got here, Michael, you sent this out the other day.
Mm-hmm.
The gold and silver miners, even though I personally do have gold and silver miners, but it's a small percentage of the bullion that I hold. I still believe in having physical, but I like to speculate as well, and I take a calculated risk, and it's up to the individual, of course, to decide. But maybe you could go through this here because
Sure.
this was
What
interesting.
this is it's a spread chart. What I mean is we divide the price of XAU index, which includes gold and silver miners, and we divide it into the price of the S&P. Get that chart up again there.
Yeah, I've got is this, no, it's not this one.
No, that's a SIF. There you go, right there. That's the chart. Yeah. Now, back in the 2008, 9, 10, 11 period, this spread was at very high levels. It was up at 18%, meaning the XAU price was 18% of the price level of the S&P. When gold collapsed in 2011, 12, and 13 on down to the 2015 low, the spread also collapsed, meaning the relative performance of gold silver miners dropped in relation to the S&P. Makes sense. Okay. It was a bear market in gold. Okay. The low on this spread is circled with that first green circle. Now, that was in December 2015 in terms of relative performance, which was totally coincident with the actual price low that occurred for gold and the gold miners, December 2015. If you then plot month to month the close of XAU divided into the price of the S&P, you come up with this spread chart. And down around 2.2%, 2015, we got bullish 2 months off that low in terms of net trend. Okay. XAU exploded to 5% of the value of the S&P. Now you say, well, 2 to 5, that's no big deal. Yeah, it is. It's a doubling. It's like buying a stock at $2.20 and it goes to 5. Okay. But then that was in that surge that occurred in 2016 in gold. Gold went from like 1,050 to 1,350 because its first exhale. It says, oh, I'm back. Okay. And then gold pulled back and then went up again, pulled back. It's reflected in this spread when the XAU goes up and down versus the S&P. Now look at what happened. There's a down trend lines I plotted. Coming off that 2015 low, you broke one, but also when you pull back into 2018, the spread also went back down to that same level, about 2.2%. And then it shot up again. It broke out over a year and a half, 2-year downtrend line and shot up again into mid 2020, coincident with a price surge in the miners and a price surge in gold, the summer of 2020. And then since that summer high in 2020, while the S&P has gone up, the gold miners have went down and now are turning back up. But look where they went back down to. They went back down again to that black horizontal to the same level it was in 2015. And right now you're actually off that low. You're at 2.4% right now versus the 2.42 as of when we did this report on Friday. So actually, you say, well, what does that mean? Well, it means right now, actually, XAU index is at the same level relative to the S&P it was in 2015, meaning it has not lost value compared to the S&P in a decade. It's ebbed and flowed, but it has not lost value. In fact, right now, when we did that report, XAU versus 2015 low was up 211% in price. S&P versus that low is 191% above the price. So actually XAU is doing a bit better than the S&P since its December 2015 low, expressed by the spread chart going par sideways and expressed by price going up as much, if not more, than the S&P. Now, there's some ETFs, for example, GDX is a little less than the S&P. But basically, for a decade, if you bought gold miners back then, when we said go long the gold miners in gold, February 2016, you haven't missed a thing by not being in this S&P and instead being in the gold miners. It's hard to believe, but it's a mathematical truism. The issue is, when will this spread ignite in a bigger way? And we've got a new structure rating right overhead, a 1, 2, 3, 4-point downtrend line there. If you get up to about 2.8%, you find any monthly close where XAU rises to 2.8% of the S&P, that's a breakout. And we argue this time it won't just go up to 4 or 5, it's likely to go up to about 17%, by the way. We've got reasons for that. But next time up, it won't just be a minor surge, it'll be far more major. And I suspect what's going to cause that are two things. One, the gold miners starting to dig in around where they are now, holding their value at current levels, and the S&P turning down. That will increase the spread. But from an investment perspective, what this chart says is, hey, don't listen to what you hear at cocktail parties, okay? Gold miners are doing quite well from an investment point of view.
Yeah, and they seem to be pretty good value here. The downside is pretty limited.
Absolutely, yeah. No, and in that spread too, if you go back and like 30 years or so, the XAU index started in the mid 80s in terms of when it came into existence. These are very, very low valuation levels.
Yeah.
Stable levels for 10 years. They've been holding par with the S&P, but they're still very low. And when they come up out of this hole, when I think the two factors come into play, one, the stock market starts to break, money flows out. And most investors, not gold bugs we're talking about, but investors, most of the people in gold miners now are gold bugs. But they're full of dread. Every time it drops, they think it's all over. Okay, and they don't realize, well, if they got in at the right time, not the highs, but the lows of the pullbacks, they're doing quite well for the last 10 years. But when you make regular investors nervous, they don't normally go in and buy bullion or futures or triple long ETFs on silver bullion. They buy miners. And some of these miners have decent dividends, So they'll shift money from the stock market into this tiny little sector, gold miners. And when that happens, because of the tininess of this sector in terms of its dollar volume, uh, that'll be a huge goose for this market, for this sector. And it doesn't take a lot of money movement to do that. And again, what are these people looking at? What are the asset managers looking at? What's been doing okay and looks cheap? Better risk, lower risk, higher reward potential. This is one of the key sectors.
Just one more question, Michael, if you can spare some more time. What do you think about the treasury or bond market? Because I think that's really important as well. And just see, are you of the view that we are in a long-term bear market now for
Yeah,
bonds?
yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of fundamentalists out there that I appreciate and know are friends with that think that the U.S. Treasury market's going to hell. And I quite agree. The fundamental factors underneath it are horrible. And if you look at a long-term yield chart, go back 30 years or so, you see this big downtrend and you broke out above the downtrend. Okay. This is yield I'm talking. We also look at price of the 30-year T-bond, which would be the opposite. Instead of going, it's gone down in price instead of rising in yield recently, and in the process broke an uptrend line. But since late 2022, yields have plateaued on the long-term end of the market. Yeah, they go up, they go down, but you can draw a sideways line. Uh, this is what, a 10-year? Yeah, okay, it reflects that to some extent. Yeah. You see that there's a downtrend you broke above. You don't have it plotted, but anybody could draw a downtrend going back to 1987 or so. Just draw a downtrend. You're out above it. Okay. Now, but the problem is even major trend changes like this can have counter trend moves. The counter trend move is not to be confused with a new major trend, but it's just a counter trend move. And right now it's plateaued up there around that 4.5%, 5% level. Now, we happen to think, now, historically, if you go back and look over the bear markets of the last 20 years or so in the stock market, T-bonds have been a good place to be. Asset managers move to T-bonds. They also move to gold. Okay. This time, the major beneficiary will be the monetary metals, but there is a potential, we see it technically, for this chart here you're looking at to have a drop, T-bonds to rally in price for, let's say, a quarter or two. No, not back to the lows you saw there near zero, no, but some kind of pullback, perhaps halfway back to the low we saw, or maybe sit back on top of that 2018 high you could see there. Yeah, right there. Maybe get a pullback to there. No, that doesn't change the major trend, which is now up in yields, but it could be a corrective decline caused primarily by money moving into treasuries. Now, treasuries have been inverse to the stock market, solidly inverse, week to week almost, for at least a quarter or two, if not more. In fact, if you go back and look at September when the Fed cut rates, S&P went up. What did T-bonds do? Went down, meaning yields went up on long-term bonds. Opposite to the Fed rate cut. And then when the stock market has a drop, T-bonds will tend to firm. Now, we see enough technical reasons to suspect and expect some kind of pullback in this market on the yield side, a rally in price. I don't think it's sustainable. It may be a joyride that lasts for a quarter or so. It won't change the major trend, but it could jolt the majority of people who are right now committed bears on the T-bonds. I think they could be wrong for a quarter or two, and it could sting them. Primarily not because the bonds are virtuous, but because the stock market panics money flow. And it goes to places that asset managers perceive to be better places to be. That would be monetary metals and T-bonds.
Do you think also it could be because the Fed steps in and other central banks and start actually doing QE to buy?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, there's a point at which they can play this game, U.S. debt market. And it's not going to be something, a new president come in is going to solve in any period of time. In fact, he might provoke it, because it's the bubble breaks, it breaks, man. And we also know that Trump is in the past, during his administration, told the Fed, cut, 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 get it lower than Europe, take it below zero. So anyway, I think T-bonds could benefit briefly and yields could drop a bit, but don't be confused by that. Ultimately, there could be a crisis there.
So to conclude, it looks to me that You think we're going into like a mid 60s to early 80s scenario where you have a bear market in bonds, you have a flat stock market, and you have a dollar depreciating versus gold. Uh,
Well, yeah. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, if but this could be far worse than any downturn in the stock market we've ever seen in terms of real world effect. Yeah, you're going to bust the stock market bubble. But we all know that whenever it busts, it causes economic consequences like a year later, 2 years later, and even after it makes its low, the economic tidal wave continues. And we know this bubble is bigger than any in the past. And it's going to cause wave effects in the real world. And the central banks, not just ours, but all of them are going to go berserk. That's what they do. That's what they were invented for. Save the government, save the debt market if they can. Problem is, the error is so big this time, it'll be a tidal wave. And we still think the main beneficiary will be real money. And it's already behaving quite well, though nobody's noticing that it's up as much on the year as the S&P is.
Great, Michael. Thank you for your time. And I want to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thank you, Mario. Very good to be here.
You're welcome.